You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots.
This is an Engage special update. Here's your host, Ryan Argenta.
Welcome back to the Engage podcast. This is a negotiations update. I'm here with Eric Criswell, the chairman of the negotiating committee, Jason Ambrosi, the MEC chairman, and Art Luby, senior advisor and negotiator. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. We appreciate your time. I know you're busy. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us, Ryan. We appreciate the time.
First, I want to thank the negotiators and everybody that's behind this. I know you've worked countless hours at the table and behind the scenes. You're working 60 to 80-hour weeks. So to Eric Criswell, to your negotiating team, Brandon Conwell, Rich Wheeler, Andrew Brenner, thank you so much on behalf of the pilot group.
Thanks, Ryan. Those guys have just been rock stars through this whole thing. It's been a long road. We still got a lot of fight in us. There's a lot of work still being done. So appreciate that.
Absolutely. So on December 2nd, the negotiator notepad described that an agreement in principle has been reached, an AIP in short. Tell us, what is an AIP? What does it mean in general?
We negotiate via term sheets. We talk in conceptual terms at the table just because trying to negotiate individual contract language pieces on their own that have tentacles to many other sections. So we talk in concepts. When you reach an agreement in principle, it means that conceptually both sides agree to make a change or to make an improvement based on the conversations at the table. Right now, we have a comprehensive agreement in principle, which means conceptually we're all lined up and the company has agreed to it.
Okay, so this is the first step. You've done the background negotiations, and there's a point at which you say, okay, we've reached an agreement. Now let's write the contract. Let's write the language. Is that correct? And is that when it becomes a TA?
That's correct. So through this whole process, we've actually been writing the language when we come to an agreement in principle in an individual section. We then go and spend time on the language. Now, since January, and every other week negotiating cadence has not left a ton of time to get the language to its final form. Because when we're at the table for a week, we're obviously preparing for each one of our turns, each one of our sessions. And then in that week between, there's a lot of work that happens to be prepared for the next session for the upcoming items that we're discussing. Going into the actual agreement in principle phase, we had at least 70% of the language completed, with the rest of it obviously waiting on the last pieces that fit into the puzzle. So that's what we've been working on. Once all sections have contract language, then it becomes a tentative agreement. That means that all the language has been flushed out. As we're recording here, we have our scheduling team down with the rest of the negotiating committee working through the section 12 and the section 23 hours of service and scheduling language. They're down there as I speak, grinding away and making sure that the language properly reflects what we negotiated at the table conceptually. Again, once all that's done, we have a TA and then we move on to the next steps.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to be blunt here. How do you know that this is enough for the Delta pilots?
We went through a painstaking process in 2018 and 2019 before we opened. And the end result of that was some of the most comprehensive direction to a negotiating committee that we're aware of, certainly in the Delta pilots' history. If you look at just the comprehensive nature of the negotiation, there are a lot of priorities that have been raised by pilots through resolutions and through council meetings and through feedback and through items that didn't get achieved in previous negotiations that finally this time got their due. That's where I want to start with this. We have turned over a lot of stones in this contract and dug up a lot of items that have needed improvement. As far as the value in the end game, we had direction on where value needed to be. Company made a few offers that, quite frankly, we didn't feel were even appropriate to bring back to our MEC because they just flat out weren't there. I believe we made about 7 passes on compensation that week, and the mediator had asked the company to bring their best, and I believe leaned on them to do so. When they did, it was at a point where we felt the MEC now needs to see where, as far as the company has come this week. So we briefed them, and this is where we ended up. My committee's not really charged with making the determination whether it's enough. This is an MEC function. We take direction, and we do not have unilateral authority in that regard to determine what's enough. Now, I will say we have done a lot of due diligence through this process to come out with the best result. I think when the full language comes out and all the notepads come out, I think people will see a lot of thought and preparation went into the gains that were made.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what Eric said. In the fact, 2019, when we started this, was a quality of life contract. Instead of doing the typical, let's just sell something in the contract for pay raises, we said, hey, look, we're going to really go out there and try to fix some things. And Eric and his team really put a lot of effort into quality of life. As the notepads come out and the language is finalized, the pilots will see that quality of life was front and center on this. And there's a heck of a lot of improvements in there.
You both bring up some great points, and there's a lot of misperceptions and rumors out there. While you've been writing the language, there's may seem like there's a lull of information, but again, that tentative agreement language is being written, and then we'll get much more information as we go forward. But there's a lot of rumors of we took the first offer the company gave, and it sounds like that's not true, right? It was back and forth. You said 7 turns, there was 30 turns on some other things, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we have one section in particular that there was over 55 table sessions to close out. And that's reflective of really every section. There's not a single case where we took what they offered the first time. That's negotiations. And pay was one of the things that was put on the table pretty late in this negotiation, but their value that this agreement reflects really happened in that last week. And it certainly wasn't their first offer.
Right. And in terms of mediation, we're operating within the Railway Labor Act, but the National Mediation Board has a role. Obviously, we worked with a mediator. How does that relate to this negotiation?
Well, the mediator under the law sets the time, agenda, and frequency of negotiations. Once one party or the other files for negotiations, it falls within the NMB and a particular mediator's jurisdiction. Our mediator was Jane Allen. She was supervised by Linda Pacella, who presently is the chairman of the National Mediation Board. We had an enormous number of open issues because based on polling, we were seeking a lot of quality of life improvements. For that reason, we asked for a very aggressive negotiating schedule, and the board complied. We negotiated 2 weeks out of the month, which is unusually frequent in Railway Labor Act negotiations. There was a hiatus, of course, during COVID when the industry was greatly impaired. And then when we reconvened in 2021, we restarted that schedule. The mediator stayed with that schedule. We worked our way through the various working condition issues and got into September. As is usually true, the big ticket pay and retirement issues were last. And we started on those in September. As is also typical, the mediator placed an embargo or a gag order on public discussions of the parties' positions while we were negotiating both pay and 401k and the other aspects of retirement. As gradually all of the other issues were closed, and she scheduled a mediation session in late October in Fort Lauderdale, and then one in Raleigh first week of November, and then one last week of November, in which the final issues were at her request. Executive officers of the company came to the last session, which is also a typical way the board handles it. And in the final sessions, she asked us to off the record proposals on compensation, or what she called proposals. We did that. And at the end, after a lot of exchanges, she asked the company, based on what had happened before, to come back with a proposal that incorporated everything that it was willing to do on compensation. The company did do that. We made some adjustments in that. And at the close of those discussions, mediator told us that we had been offered what she believed and the board believed was the richest package in the history of the industry overall, and that at this point they had done everything they could do, that if it was not acceptable, that they would have to redirect their resources to other negotiations, and that they would meet with us in a status conference sometime in the next year, no earlier than late January. And she further stated that based on the company's proposal, which she believed was a good faith effort and a reasonable one to close negotiations, that the board was not going to offer a release. The way this all developed was what I've experienced in other negotiations, and particularly the decision on release. I was involved in the last release in the airline industry, which was at Spirit Airlines. And that release was obtained because the company, in the board's view, was making unreasonable demands or demands outside what it calls the zone of reasonableness for cost savings that were completely out of sync with the industry. the board did not view Delta's final proposal as anything like that. They viewed it as a major advance that was well above anything in the industry.
That was attorney Art Luby, again, a professional negotiator, is a senior advisor from ALPA National. So the richest contract that she's seen, the mediator has seen in history, is an impressive comment to make from a mediator. Art, you've been doing this for 40 plus years. You've seen Spirit, you've seen it all. Thanks for that recap. That's a wrap up from the horse's mouth. So thank you for that. 2 points I want to turn to in terms of value. And you talk about 7.2 billion in value in a contract. I'm not sure that Delta pilots are quite used to soft costs, right? This is a big quality of life improvement over what we're used to. And it feels good, right? It's sexy to have these big numbers of pay raises and retro and all these other things. But there's a lot of soft costs that will add up there. Can you comment on that?
I use those terms flies under the radar. And that's really what we're talking about here. So if you look at our 15% compensation increase in the first year of the contract, the actual cost of the contract goes up somewhere between 24 and 25%. So that 24 to 25% is really the net effect to what pilots will feel as a result of the contract. About a quarter of the value in this contract is delivered via soft items, via rotation construction improvements, via some of the pay bands moving up, via major gains in vacation and other quality of life items. Those things end up driving paychecks higher, but they're not necessarily reflected in the pay table. So that was really another one of our main goals in this contract, was to gain some of those soft items back that have always driven the total compensation package for a pilot up in the past. And a lot of those items went away when the airlines went through rough times during the bankruptcy era. So this reestablished a lot of that. And we didn't get everything we were aiming for, nor does anyone during any negotiation. But again, there's a lot of detail that will be communicated about what was done in each section of this contract that will really paint the full picture that is maybe missing from the conversation over just the 18% in the pay table.
Yeah, I agree. And I've even been surprised by some of the things that have been negotiated, again, section 12 and 23 in scheduling, where those soft costs aren't necessarily just feel good costs. For example, some airport sits. If you have an airport sit of 4 hours, now you're going to be compensated for that. So there's additional value in ways that we may not be thinking traditionally on. Eric, is there some strategy in the negotiations or some strategy with the MEC in striking an AIP and moving forward at this point in time?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of commentary about the NMB put pressure and we took the deal because of that. And at the end of the day, negotiate with Delta. The NMB is a facilitator in the process. They obviously want both sides to come to a deal that they can live with. But at the end of the day, our counterpart at the table is the company. We viewed the negotiation in that context. Not to say the NMB didn't influence where we ended up, but one major threat that is outside of the NMB's influence would be what potentially could happen in the rest of the industry, especially with regard to airlines that are very close to reaching deals. We saw what's happened at United and American over the last 6 to 8 months. Obviously, those deals were inadequate in the industry and didn't move forward. But I'm not certain that either one of those pilot groups or unions were aiming at the level that we were either. So there is some threat in other airlines setting the market for us. So the fact that we came out first, and then we also came out with an unrestricted Me Too clause that looks at both United and American, I believe we've really covered all bases. And as a little sidebar, the Me Too clause that we negotiated, when I say unrestricted, what I mean is that there's no cap in what it can add to our pay table. So let's just use an example of if United comes in next with a contract and they leapfrog our rates by 2%, we compare our top pay aircraft to their top pay aircraft. If that comparison yields a 2% increase for the United pilots, we then take 2, we add another percent to it. So that would be a total of a 3% increase delivered by our Me Too to our entire pay table. It would apply all the way from the 717 up to the A350. We would now receive a 3% raise on top. So we would stay 1% ahead of United. And then if American comes in and leapfrogs that, the same thing would happen with American. So the likelihood is that we see something out of that Me Too in this contract cycle, and it's not limited in any way.
Yeah, that's impressive. And I think that's an important point to make. So a little bit of strategy there with other airlines, with the industry. That's certainly appreciated. And then that Me Too clause is quite robust, if I may say. So I think that's important for us to understand. And again, all this information is going to be coming out. More podcasts. We're going to do one for each significant section, more negotiator notepads, education coming. So for now, we'll say Delta leads the way. And we'll all be rooting for United going next. But I'd like to move on to what are the next steps in the process? So here we are, you have an AIP, you're writing the language. What happens next? And what's the timeline for that?
They're passing language back and forth with the company. They're making excellent progress. So we can't say a specific date or time that the language will be done because there are some complex sections to go, like 12 and 23. So they're going to finish the language, get the notepads written, get the information out there to the pilot. So then the MEC will get the information, get the language for 7 full days. They'll get that information. And at the same time, the pilots will get the information, have an opportunity to look at it, weigh into their representatives. And then the reps will have a vote in open session. At that point, we start the ratification window for the pilots. But I ask for the pilots' patience as the negotiating committee and the subject matter experts do their work.
Ryan, I'll jump in too. So it's not well understood that during that last week, it was more than just pay and retirement that was still on the table, unresolved. We came into that week still with Section 12 and Section 23 open. We had obviously the payback day issue that had been a long standing ask of the company. We had the unstacking issue, which had been a long standing ask of the company. We had rotation construction asks that we had been requesting throughout this negotiation that were still part of our position. And we had the global scope agreement that, quite frankly, there was still one section that we were a part that was identified during language drafting this summer that we had been holding on. The company basically came to our position on every one of those items during that week. And again, that's a piece of perspective that I think is not well known out there, but that gives a little more context too to their final closing offer. They dropped their request in Section 23 and they came to us on our requests on these other pieces. As far as the agreement itself, one commitment that I will make to the pilot group, my committee will not be selling this. We'll be writing notepads with facts in them. We will be doing road shows and we will answer any question that's asked to the best of our ability to answer it. We will be the factual subject matter experts on what was negotiated. Like Jason said, we appreciate the patience. There's a lot of items that were negotiated. This TA language writing process still had a lot of items open in that end game discussion that we're now writing in language. The patience is appreciated. Obviously, we're fighting a holiday between now and the ratification timeline as well, which just slows things down as a natural side effect of where we're at in the calendar. But again, we're here to convey the facts, and at the end of the day, the pilots will be the deciders of this.
I would add one other thing. So people are clear, the NB can't tell us to accept anything and can't tell the company to accept anything. The decision on whether the union accepts belongs to the members and the MEC. That said, the NMB can influence the process by setting the agenda, frequency of discussions, and they frequently do. The only way in which an agreement can be imposed is the process that everyone just witnessed the road workers going through. That was not alluded to by the mediator, but at the same time, since that process is based on a release, she made clear that a release was not going to be contemplated by the NMB in this case.
And a release would mean release for self-help, i.e.
A strike.
That's correct.
And the NMB has essentially said they will not release the Delta pilots.
That's correct.
Okay. Eric, you mentioned global scope. What's the situation with that? Is it still going to be a separate vote, a separate entity from the TA that will eventually go in there? But is that separate? And how about the market-based cash balance plan?
Yeah, like Jason alluded to, this global scope agreement had kind of been hanging out there. One really open issue from the agreement in principle that was reached back in May was still being hashed out in the language writing process. And again, that issue was resolved to our satisfaction during that week. So we do have an agreement in principle. We are very close to a TA on the language and global scope. That language was 95% drafted when this issue that popped up this summer was identified. So yeah, that'll go along. The intent right now, barring anything unforeseen, would be to have one ratification ballot that asks 2 questions. The first one is on the matter of contract 2019. Do you agree or disagree? And then the second is on the matter of global scope. Do you agree or disagree? So those would come to the pilot at the same time. It can vote on them independently. As far as education goes, As soon as the MEC considers the TA and they're briefed in open session, the intent then is to get negotiators notepads that outline all the different changes in this agreement into the public domain. Market-based cash balance plan has been a marathon and a half. I guess I'd call it
An ultra marathon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing like we ever anticipated it would be. Back in 2018, the thought process was that we could get the answer from Treasury pretty quickly if they were going to hold up a new plan at Delta because of our restrictions under the Pension Protection Act of 2006. Those restrictions expire in October of 2023. So of course, when we're sitting back in 2018, that's 5 years in the future. Never would have imagined that date would become a player. We've had numerous meetings with various advisors trying to help us get an answer from Treasury. We just flat out can't get it. They will not give us an answer that we need to be able to move forward with the plan. So October 1st of 2023, that restriction drops. Right now, the plan document has been fully vetted by us in the company. It's ready for submission to the IRS. Once it's submitted to the IRS, we can start to operate the plan. So the intent would be to do that in October 1st of this year. Now, of course, there's the kind of lingering on the optionality piece under LOA 2004, where we established the market-based cash balance plan. It was established as an optional plan. There's been a lot of conversation that's happened with that as well. Now, this is all up for the MEC to decide in the end, but I believe if the answer is that this plan will exist for all Delta pilots without any kind of option to maintain status quo benefits, then that would require a different ratification. Again, that's not a decision that I get to make or my committee gets to make. That's a decision for the MEC to decide.
Okay. That was a lot of information, but it sounds like more to come on the market-based cash balance plan and global scope coming along nicely.
Between the wage gains in the contract, as well as the DC increases through the term of the contract, we expect a record number of Delta pilots will be hitting their 401k limits in the term of this contract. So really, the market-based cash balance plan can't come at a better time because there really is a void now in our retirement benefit where we really can't accommodate the retirement value and monies that are being given to us in our contract. So timing is good on that. Obviously, the first tranche of the DC increase comes in data signing plus one of this contract. The intent is to have the market-based cash plan, balance plan all up and running to receive those new funds, especially in the context of a couple healthy raises in the meantime.
Perfect. And you couldn't have teed it up better because we just wrapped a retirement and insurance episode. That'll be coming out very soon, probably next week. And that covers all of those issues. It gives some tips and tricks on the 401k. It's called Mo Money, Mo Problems. You can look for that soon. Let's move on. So it sounds like let's take a breather, get through the holidays, enjoy the holidays, and then more information, more things will be coming out in the new year, probably in January, and we'll go from there. The MEC, those are your elected representatives, they'll have the TA language next. They've got 7 days to review it and cast their vote in favor or against. And if the MEC votes in favor, then it'll go to membership, which is each individual pilot. The pilots get 60 days to 45 days. Jason, do you want to touch on that?
So the policy manual defaults to a 60-day timeline. Traditionally, it has been reduced with a simple majority vote to 45 days for the timeline because we're out there early with information. So there'll be time for education. There may be an opportunity to get the window to 45 days. Anything less than 45 days, Ryan, the MEC would have to waive policy manual language to reduce it beyond that.
I'll add too, Ryan, as far as the timeline goes, my committee, we are pulling 12 to 14 hour days right now. And there really won't be a break in that over the holiday. We have a lot of writing to do. We probably have 100+ pages of negotiators notepad that is in the works right now based on all the various sections. So there's an intense amount of work. The holiday obviously adds some drag to that because we have SMEs that have to weigh in. We still have to pass things through the company with the language and things slow down during that time, which is just a burden that we got to work through. But we will definitely be pushing this thing as hard as we can to get this in front of the pilots as soon as we can.
That's an excellent point. To make it clear that we're not taking a 2-week hiatus over the holidays. Everybody is continuing to work their tails off to get this agreement out there. If the MEC feels this agreement is suitable enough for the pilots and the pilots vote on it and feel that it's suitable enough, ratify, we want pilots getting paid sooner. We want the quality of life improvement sooner. So we're certainly not going to rush the process, but we're certainly not going to take 2 weeks off over the holidays or drag our feet on this process because we don't want to delay implementation if possible.
Just put numbers with that. every week later that there's ratification is a potential that there's $20 to $25 million less value delivered to the pilots. So that is at the front, the middle, and the back of all of our minds right now with this timeline. We're not rushing, but we're devoting all of our energy right now into getting this where it needs to be to get in front of the MEC and then ultimately in front of the pilots.
Awesome. And I'll add my own perspective here. Being in the office and walking around, the negotiators work in a place called the bunker, as we affectionately know it. And they're there constantly, again, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. So again, thank you for that.
It's soundproof, so nobody can hear.
It's security access. It's actually impressive, hence the name, the bunker. When should pilots contact their reps with their opinions? The MEC is going to vote on this. When should pilots contact their reps?
I encourage pilots to contact their reps and give their feedback all the time. It's important. You want to hear from not just one group, but all pilots. That said, though, it's tough right now when we don't have all the other sections, all the other information. So pilots may be giving feedback based on less than complete information. So I would say, please keep your ears open and eyes open and read what comes out. Wait until we get the full language in front of you to evaluate what's right for you, your family, and then provide feedback at that point. Pilots have the ultimate feedback, though. They vote on the agreement.
And normally at this point in the process, there wouldn't be this level of detail out on circulation. Normally there's an announcement of an AIP, and then things generally go quiet for a month or so while this process plays out with language and writing educational materials and developing roadshows. We took the tack that, hey, look, this has been a long road. There's a lot of interest in what's happening with this contract, and made the decision to the high level bullet points of what's in the agreement, but it is by no means comprehensive. And there's a lot of detail and information behind each one of those bullets that we shared. So we do appreciate everyone's patience while we put all that together. There's a lot of content here.
Excellent. We'll be patient. Jason, should we still be wearing our green lanyards, a bag tag? Should we still be hats off to a new contract?
Look, the job is not done. So we ask the pilots continue to show their unity, show solidarity out there on the line, and make sure we are still a unified group.
Keep the lanyards on, bag tags, et cetera. Got it. Speaking of which, I noticed the strike center is still open.
Yeah, the strike center is absolutely open. Again, until we have a TA, the MEC feels is ready for the pilots. We're not standing down. We've got work to do.
Perfect. And final question, what do you need from us? What do you need from the pilots?
Just patience. We're working as hard as we can to move forward, but patience. Look at everything when you get it, evaluate it on its merits, talk with your families, look at everything, give feedback to the MEC. Social media does not tell the full tale. Social media sure is a good way to get information out there and for people to communicate with each other. But there's a lot of facts that are yet to be revealed. So again, patience, the language is coming, the negotiator notepads are coming.
Do whatever you can to attend one of the roadshows. We're hoping that happens late January, the best we can guess right now. That's going to be the primary source to communicate with the people that were at the table negotiating this. We've got email. You can submit a dart to the negotiating committee. We've been trying to turn those around as quick as we can. So send us a note and we will get back to you just as quick as we're able to. And we've been able to turn them pretty quick as well. So stay engaged. Make sure you understand the terms of the agreement, not just what your buddy told you. Please reach out to us. Please reach out to your reps. Come to the roadshows if you can. Catch a town hall. All of that's good stuff. But for now, at the very immediate, just that having some patience as we get this thing to the next step.
Awesome. And I'll plug Pilot Unity. I mean, we've come so far in Pilot Unity. Now's not the time to do your own thing. The company's still watching. This is important for us to stay galvanized and stay united. So again, the green lanyards, the bag tags, the hats, it all matters. We're not quite there yet, but we're close.
Make no mistake, the Pilot Unity and Solidarity, a record strike vote, got us to where we have a 45% increase in value in one contract cycle. Is every section exactly what we wanted? Of course not. But at the end of the day, the pilots' unity and solidarity are where, as Art explained, where we're at the biggest increase in value in the history of the RLA. So it did work. So keep it up and we'll get there.
Very good. Eric Criswell, Jason Ambrosi, Attorney Art Luby, thanks for being here. We appreciate your time, appreciate your work. Hope you get some time with your families, and happy holidays to each of you.
Thanks, Ryan. Just in closing, I'd like to give a shout out to Eric, Rich, and Brandon and how hard they work, as well as everybody else that works with them. The attorneys, the subject matter experts, there's an enormous group of people that are working really hard every day to improve the lives of our members. They've done a great job. There are improvements in every section of this contract. And again, patience while they get that language finalized and the information out is really appreciated. Eric, your team, Art, everybody would like to give you a thank you on behalf of from all the Delta pilots and their families.
Thanks, Jace. Thanks, Ryan, for all your hard work getting the message out. I think these podcasts are really welcome, and I know that they're popular, and I know you put a lot of work into them. So appreciate you doing this.
Absolutely. Thanks. This has been Engaged, the podcast for Delta pilots. Thanks for listening. My name is Ryan Argenta. Stay safe and keep the rubber on the road.
You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform, and receive notifications when a new episode is available.